I was 23 years old, holding my own passport for the first time in my life, when I realized my Nigerian parents' strictness wasn't about control. It was about terror. And the reason why nearly broke me. Growing up in Peckham, I was that girl. You know the one, brilliant grades, church 3 times a week, home by 6 p.m. sharp, no sleepovers, no parties, no breathing without permission. While my friends were living their best lives, I was suffocating under rules that made prison look relaxed. My parents, especially my mom, watched me like I was about to disappear into thin air at any moment. "Adoni, where are you going?" Mom would ask in Yoruba, even if I was just taking the beans out. "Have you finished your studies?" Dad would demand before I could even think about watching TV. Every Nigerian kid knows strict parents, yeah? But mine were on another level entirely. And I spent my whole childhood resenting them for it. My name is Adoni Ko, and I'm the only child of Dr. Babatunde and Mrs. Foleko. On paper, I had everything: 2 successful Nigerian immigrant parents, a nice house in a good area, private school education, church community that loved me. But I felt like I was drowning in expectations and rules that made no sense for someone growing up in South London in the 2010s. My parents came to the UK in the late 90s. Dad's a GP now, mom's a senior nurse. Respectable. Successful. The kind of Nigerian immigrants everyone at church praised. "See Dr. Cole's daughter," the aunties would say. So well behaved, so studious. If only they knew I was dying inside. The rules were insane. I couldn't go to friends' houses, they had to come to mine, and mom would hover the entire time. I couldn't join after-school clubs because you need to come straight home. I couldn't do sleepovers, couldn't go to shopping centers alone until I was 17, couldn't even have social media until I was 16, and even then, mom checked it daily. "We're not like these English people who don't care about their children," mom would say whenever I protested. "We know the dangers out there." But what dangers? We lived in Peckham, not a war zone. I went to a good school. I had sensible friends. Yet my parents acted like I was constantly one moment away from disaster. Church was non-negotiable: Sunday service, Tuesday Bible study, Friday night prayers. I spent more time at a CCG Winners Chapel than I did at home. I became assistant youth leader because, well, what choice did I have? At least at church youth group, I could be around other teenagers, even if we were all performing Good Nigerian Child for our parents watching from the main hall. School was another prison. I had to be top of my class, not just good, but the best. Dad would review my report cards like he was auditing a company. Anything less than an A was a disappointment. A-. That was failure. "There are children back home who would kill for your opportunities," he'd say. "You want to waste them." I got into Queen Mary University to study law. Not because I wanted to be a lawyer, God, no, but because Dad had decided that was my path when I was about 12. Doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Those were the only acceptable options for a Nigerian child who wanted to keep their parents' respect. But here's the thing: I wanted to study English literature. I loved reading, loved writing, wanted to be a journalist or maybe work in publishing. I'd gotten offers from King's College and UCL for English. But when I mentioned it at Sunday lunch, you'd think I'd announced I was joining a gang. English. Dad laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "And what will you do with that?" "Teach. We didn't sacrifice everything to bring you to this country so you could struggle like an English teacher." Mom just shook her head, heart in her eyes. "Adoni, why do you want to disappoint us like this?" That word, disappoint. It was their favorite weapon. Not anger, not shouting. Just deep, profound disappointment that made you feel like you'd personally spat on every sacrifice they'd ever made. I was 18 years old, a legal adult in this country, but I felt about 5. "I'll study law," I heard myself say. And something inside me died a little. University should have been freedom, right? Wrong. I was the only fresher living at home. My parents refused to let me stay in halls. Why would you waste money living away when we're right here in London? Dad said. Never mind that Queen Mary was in Mile End and Peckham wasn't exactly next door. Never mind that every other student was experiencing independence, making mistakes, learning about life. I commuted 2 hours a day while my would-be flatmates, were having the time of their lives. I watched their Instagram stories from the outside, seeing the parties, the late-night study sessions, the random 2 a.m. Nando's runs. I was missing everything. The breaking point came during my first year. There was a law society trip to Brussels, 3 days, completely educational, supervised by lecturers. Everyone was going. It would look good on my CV. It was literally part of our course enrichment. I asked my parents 2 months in advance. I prepared a whole presentation, itinerary, hotel details, lecturer contact information, educational value. I'd never asked for anything like this before. No, Mom said before I'd even finished. But Mom. I said no, Adoni. Her voice had that edge that meant discussion over. You're not going to another country without us. I'm 19 years old. You're our daughter. That's what you are. I snapped. Nearly 2 decades of being the perfect Nigerian daughter, of suffocating under rules that made no sense, of watching other people live while I merely existed, it all exploded. I can't breathe in this house. I shouted. You treat me like I'm going to die if you take your eyes off me for 5 minutes. I'm not a child. Dad stood up, his face dark. You're not going, and that's final. While you live under our roof. Then maybe I shouldn't live under your roof. The words hung in the air like a curse. Mom's face went pale. Dad looked like I'd physically struck him. Adoni, Mom whispered, switching to Yoruba, SEOMOOHONTION so. Do you know what you're saying? I did know. And I couldn't take it back even if I wanted to. That night, I applied for emergency accommodation through the university. A week later, I moved into a shared house in Stratford with 3 other students. I took 1 suitcase, my laptop, and enough guilt to fill the Thames. My parents didn't try to stop me. That's what hurt most. They just watched me leave, Mom crying silently in the doorway, Dad's face torn. I thought they'd call, text, beg me to come home. They didn't. The silence was deafening. I blocked their numbers. Childish. Maybe. But I needed space to breathe for the first time in my life. Church people started calling, aunties asking if I was okay, if I'd lost my mind, telling me to respect my parents. I ignored them all. For 3 months, I tasted freedom. I went to lectures and actually stayed afterward to chat with classmates. I joined the law society. I went to parties, okay, I went to 1 party, left after an hour because I didn't drink and the music was too loud, but still. I went. I made friends who knew me as Adoni, not Dr. Cole's daughter or that quiet girl from church. I even went on a date. His name was Marcus, British Jamaican guy from my constitutional law seminar. We went for coffee. It was nice. Innocent. But it felt revolutionary. Life wasn't perfect, I was broke because I was paying rent, I missed my mom's cooking, and guilt gnawed at me daily. But I was breathing. Then my phone rang at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Adoni. A voice I didn't recognize. This is your dad's colleague, Dr. Okonkwo. Your mom's been taken to King's College Hospital. You need to come now. My blood went cold. What happened? Just come. Cardiac ward. I don't remember the Uber ride. I just remember running through hospital corridors in my pajamas and old trainers, heart hammering, thinking, please God, not like this. Don't let the last thing I said to her be in anger. Dad was in the waiting room, looking 10 years older than when I'd left. When he saw me, something in his face crumbled. She collapsed at work, he said quietly. Heart attack. She's stable now but. I sat next to him. We didn't speak. At 6 a.m., a doctor let us in to see her. Mom looked so small in that hospital bed, wires and machines everywhere. When she saw me, she smiled weakly. Adoni. You came. Of course I came, Mom. Her hand found mine. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Listen to me. Her grip tightened with surprising strength. There are things you don't know. Things we should have told you. Dad stood abruptly. Folic, not now. Yes now, turned. Mom's eyes filled with tears. She deserves to know why. And there, in that hospital room at dawn, my mother told me about Morayo. Morayo was my sister. My twin sister. Born 3 minutes before me in Lagos in 1998. I had a sister. A twin. And I never knew. My parents brought us to the UK when we were 6 months old. Dad had gotten his job, Mom her nursing qualification recognized. They were staying with Dad's cousin in Peckham while they got settled. One Saturday afternoon, they took us to Deptford Market. Mom was carrying me, Dad had Morayo. The market was crowded. Dad put Morayo down for just a moment to pay for something. Just one moment. When he turned back, she was gone. They searched for hours. Days. Weeks. Police investigated. They put up flyers. Dad's entire Nigerian network in London searched. But Morayo vanished like she'd never existed. 6 months old, just gone. They never found her, Mom sobbed. Not a trace. Nobody, no evidence, nothing. She just disappeared into London. The police eventually concluded she'd been taken, possibly trafficked. A Nigerian baby with no British documents yet easy target. They suggested my parents move on, have another child. Like Morayo was replaceable. But they couldn't have more children. I was it. The only piece of the pair they had left. So you see, Mom said, gripping my hand like I might dissolve, you weren't just our daughter. You were all we had left of both our girls. The thought of losing you too, of you disappearing like your sister. She broke down completely. Everything clicked into place. The suffocating rules. The constant supervision. The terror in their eyes anytime I was out of sight. The way Mom checked on me sleeping even when I was a teenager. Dad's obsessive tracking of where I was. The refusal to let me travel, to let me live in halls, to let me breathe. They weren't controlling me. They were desperately, frantically trying to keep me alive. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. How do you tell a child they had a twin who was stolen? Dad said, his voice breaking. How do you give them that fear? We wanted you to have a normal life, not grow up terrified. But I hadn't had a normal life. I'd had a suffocating one, built on a tragedy I never knew existed. When you left, Mom continued, it was like losing Morayo all over again. I kept thinking, what if something happens to her? What if she disappears too and I'm not there to protect her? That's why I got ill. The stress, the fear. I laid my head on her hospital bed and cried for the sister I never knew, for the parents who'd lived with unimaginable trauma for 19 years, for the family we could have been. The next few weeks changed everything. Mom recovered, thank God. We started family therapy, proper therapy, not just church prayer sessions. My parents began processing their trauma instead of just reacting from it. And we talked. Really talked. I learned that every strict rule had been a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. Every no was rooted in a terror they'd lived with for nearly 2 decades. Every hovering moment was them trying to protect me from a world that had already taken one daughter. I'm still at university, but I visit home twice a week now. We are learning balance, they are learning to loosen their grip, I'm learning to have compassion for their trauma. It's not perfect, but it's progress. I asked to see photos of Morayo once. There weren't many, they'd been so young, cameras weren't everywhere like now. But there's one of us together, 2 tiny babies in matching pink outfits. I look at it sometimes and think about the life she should have had, the sister I should have known. My parents still worry. They probably always will. But now when mom texts me 3 times a day, I understand it's not control, it's love mixed with fear that's hard to unlearn. When dad asks for my location, I share it without resentment, knowing he's just checking I'm safe, not disappeared. I switched my degree to English literature in 2nd year. Dad wasn't happy about it, but he didn't fight me. Just promise me you'll be safe, he said. That's all I ask. Last month was Morayo's birthday, our birthday. We lit a candle for her at church, the 3 of us. Pastor prayed for her, wherever she might be. 25 years old now, if she's alive. It's unlikely, but my parents have never stopped hoping. I still get frustrated with their protectiveness sometimes. Old habits die hard on both sides. But now when I feel suffocated, I remember why they hold on so tight. They already lost one daughter to a moment's inattention. They are terrified of history repeating itself. So to any second-gen kids out there struggling with strict African parents, I'm not saying it's always trauma. Sometimes parents are genuinely just controlling or too traditional. But sometimes, there are wounds you don't know about. Sometimes their strictness is how they show love when they are too afraid to lose you. My parents weren't perfect. Their trauma affected me in ways we're still unpacking. But they loved me fiercely, even when I couldn't see it. Even when their love felt like a cage. I finally understand that now. These days, I carry 2 photos in my wallet, one of me, one of the twin I never knew. Morayo, if you're out there somewhere, you have a family who never stopped looking. And a sister who wishes she'd known you. Mom still checks on me sleeping sometimes. I let her. It's the least I can do.